How to learn English. Arian's struggle to learn English was a marathon, not a sprint, filled with obstacles, small victories, and endless perseverance. His story is one of patience and transformation, a tale of how language, initially an intimidating barrier, became his closest ally. From a young age, Arian felt disconnected from English. In school, the rules of grammar seemed like a riddle he couldn't solve, and the fear of mispronunciation silenced him. His classmates teased him whenever he tried to speak, making him retreat into himself. His teachers' advice to keep practicing sounded logical, but it offered little comfort. Practice, for Arian, felt like walking into a storm without an umbrella. Every stumble chipped away at his self-confidence until he stopped trying altogether. One day, his uncle, who had traveled the world working with international clients, came to visit. Fluent in several languages, his uncle made speaking English look easy. Arian shared his struggles, expecting advice. Instead, his uncle laughed warmly and said, "Learning a language is like planting a tree. It takes time to grow, but the more you water it, the stronger it becomes." He handed Arian a small notebook and added, "Write one word a day, just one. And watch what happens." Skeptical but desperate for a change, Arian decided to give it a try. He began with words like hello asterisk, thank you asterisk, and sorry asterisk, simple, everyday words he heard but never used himself. At first, it felt pointless, like trying to fill a river with drops of water. But each word added a small layer to his understanding. He didn't just write the words, he practiced using them in conversations with his family and friends, even when it felt awkward. Little by little, he saw progress. His sentences, though clumsy, were becoming longer, and the silence that had once surrounded him began to break. Then came reading. Arian knew that if he wanted to truly master the language, he needed to immerse himself in it. His school library offered a limited selection of English books, but he started with children's stories, ones with simple words and colorful pictures. Reading was slow, and he often had to use a dictionary to understand the meanings, but he enjoyed the process. It felt like solving a puzzle, piecing together the meaning of each sentence. Over time, the pages didn't seem as daunting, and the words began to feel more familiar. His breakthrough came in the form of movies and music. Arian discovered that English movies, with their subtitles, were a fun way to learn. He watched animated films and sitcoms, pausing every few minutes to mimic the dialogue. He learned how words were spoken in different accents, how emotions could change the way a sentence was said. Music, too, became a great teacher. Songs by Ed Sheeran, Adele, and the Beatles captivated him, and he found himself writing down lyrics, translating them, and singing along. His pronunciation improved, and he found joy in the rhythm of the language. As months passed, Arian realized that his fear of English was slowly fading. He made a habit of talking to himself in English, narrating his day-to-day activities as if he were hosting a podcast in his head. He also started speaking with strangers on language learning apps, where he could practice without the fear of being judged. These conversations opened up a new world for him, one where English wasn't just a subject to be learned, but a tool for building friendships. However, the journey wasn't without setbacks. There were days when he felt stuck, unable to express his thoughts clearly. Moments when the grammar rules still seemed confusing. He doubted himself, questioned whether he would ever truly feel comfortable in the language. But Aryan had learned an important lesson. Language learning wasn't about perfection, it was about persistence. Every mistake was a step forward, every failure a lesson. The biggest challenge came when his teacher encouraged him to participate in a public speaking contest. The idea of standing in front of an audience and speaking in English made his heart race. But Aryan knew that this was the next step in his journey. He spent weeks preparing his speech, practicing in front of mirrors, his family, and even his dog. On the day of the contest, he stood on stage, heart pounding, palms sweating. His voice trembled at first, but as he began to speak, the fear melted away. He shared his journey, his struggles, his small victories, and his newfound love for English. When he finished, the audience erupted in applause. That moment marked a turning point for Aryan. He realized that learning a language wasn't just about grammar or vocabulary, it was about courage, patience, and embracing every mistake along the way. English was no longer just a subject in school. It was a key that opened doors to new experiences and friendships. Years later, Aryan would go on to become a language coach, helping others overcome their fear of English. He would tell them his story, the story of a boy who had once been afraid to speak, who had struggled and stumbled, but who had never given up. And he would share the advice his uncle had given him: learning a language is like planting a tree. Water it with effort every day, and it will grow. Slowly, but surely.